Hello, everyone. This is my testimony. My name is Beth Wynn, and this is the second part of the testimony that I began recording earlier. I had to take a rest. For me, if I talk too long, I get really winded and dizzy, so I had to take a break. For that, I appreciate your patience, and I will continue my testimony where I left off. When my husband and I left to go to Johns Hopkins, we arrived, and the neurosurgeon immediately knew what was wrong. He told me I had a narrowed artery in my brain and had suffered a mild stroke. By this time, I was not treated effectively and had right-sided weakness, slurred speech, my walking was unsteady and erratic, and I had urinary incontinence. My right eyelid drooped and my smile was asymmetrical. I was in tears in his office because I thought we finally knew why I was so sick. I thought we were finally going to have answers and a treatment plan. He told me that I had pseudotumor cerebri and I also had some optic nerve bulging, um, which are discs in the eyes that can lead to blindness from the pressure that was there. And I was having stroke symptoms. He explained to me that I did not have a full stroke, but that I was having stroke symptoms from the pseudotumor cerebri, which is also called intracranial hypertension. Um, by the time I got to Johns Hopkins, I had not been treated effectively, so I had slurred speech, right-sided weakness. I had droopiness in my right eyelid that was very pronounced. I had memory problems. I had trouble remembering um, or forgetting things, like I might turn on the stove and forget I had done it. Um, just very strange things. My walking was unsteady and kind of zigzagged. I walked as if I had had some alcohol, but I hadn't had anything to drink. Um, I had urinary incontinence, so I would feel like I had to go to the bathroom, and then if I didn't get up immediately and go, I couldn't hold it. Um, my smile was asymmetrical. It still is if you see me smile on the camera. One side's a little higher than the other. Um, I was in tears in his office because I thought we finally knew why I was sick and we were going to get some help. Um, I also had a positive Babinski in my right foot, and for babies, a positive Babinski is a normal reflex for them to have. It means that when the doctor basically takes an instrument and rubs the sharp side of the instrument into the bottom of the foot, the toes will fan up and out, or the toes will fan downward, excuse me. With an adult, I may have that backwards, but I'm not going to stop and check it. At any rate, um, for an adult, you shouldn't have that reflex. It should be gone. And for me, I did have that reflex. So they knew that something was wrong. And besides that, when I would close my eyes, I had something called pronator drift, and I still have it. And it's when someone closes their eyes and they hold their arms out in front of their body, one arm will drift downward. In a normal person with no neurological problems, the arms are symmetrical. In other words, both of the arms will stay up when you close your eyes. I cannot close my eyes and stand without assistance, or I will fall. So it's definitely a neurological problem. Um, the doctor at Johns Hopkins ordered an MRI and a spinal tap. The spinal tap was probably around the 10th one I'd had in a span of less than a few months, so I dreaded it. Spinal taps, for anyone who has not had them, they're very painful. The doctor takes a long needle and basically sticks it inside your spine to draw out spinal fluid. And first they numb up your back, which requires several shots of lidocaine. They feel like a bee sting. And you have to remain completely motionless and during the procedure, and like I said, the procedure is extremely painful. So each and every time I had that done, I would just cry because it hurts so badly. But I was so desperate to find out what was wrong, I was willing to go through the pain. Um, I got the test that he ordered, and the doctor assured me that they were better than the equipment that we had here in Georgia, so I agreed to go through it. Um, the nurse offered to give me headphones, and so I said okay and said a quick prayer that Jesus would be with me and help me through it. I also prayed for a sign that I was with the right doctor. Great is thy faithfulness started playing on the headphones. I smiled and relaxed, knowing all was well. I was scheduled for surgery to insert a shunt that's a device to drain fluid from around the brain, and this one would dump the fluid into my abdomen, relieving the symptoms. I prayed about it and felt like it was the right thing to do. I had no other options, and the surgeon was confident, so I said okay. The night before my surgery, a man approached me and my spouse on the street in Baltimore. He grabbed our hands and said all would be okay. He appeared to be homeless, and yet he had the widest grin on his face. He looked at me and my husband the night before my surgery and said, Jesus loves you, and he will take care of you no matter what, my friend. Don't be afraid of anything as long as he is your brother, as long as he is your Lord and Savior. He took my husband's hand and said, Sir, I do not know you, but you are my brother in Jesus, and he will take care of your wife. Then he was gone. I don't know where he came from, but I believe he was a guardian angel sent to us to calm our spirit the night before my surgery. I went through surgery the following day, and when I woke up, my stroke symptoms were mostly gone. I was amazed and thrilled. We went home after a week, but this was only the beginning. In November of 2012, I was lonely after my surgery at home. My husband's parents came to help take care of me because I was not recovering as fast as expected. I began to experience shortness of breath and high heart rate with little movement. Initially, it was thought I had a blood clot in my lungs after having surgery, but after being admitted to the hospital for a week and undergoing rigorous testing, it was found I had low oxygen and high heart rate on exertion with no known cause. When I first came home from the surgery, I was so panicked whenever I did any activity that doctors were quick to say that I had anxiety. But all honesty, when a doctor was so scholarly as to check my oxygen saturation, it was in the low 60s on exertion with my heart rate going up to around 150. Normal oxygen in a healthy human being is between 90 and 100. When your oxygen level falls below 90, you start to experience confusion and panicked episodes and anxiety. This is a normal reaction to low oxygen. So they were wrong. My symptoms were initially attributed to anxiety, but in all honesty, I was having low oxygen levels. Um, I underwent a heart catheterization that showed nothing in November. My doctors that tested me wanted to do the test with me just laying still, but all of my symptoms would get worse when I would get up to move around. Laying still, I didn't get symptoms. It wasn't until I got up to move that the symptoms started. So I was sent home on oxygen because my sats were in the low 80s and 70s when I got up to move. No doctor here in Georgia could figure out why. I began to pray fervently for answers. I was getting discouraged. No one from my job had called, and people began to distance themselves from me. Um, when I was put on oxygen, it was like I had leprosy. Nobody wanted to be around me. They were fearful of what was happening. Some people were afraid I was dying, so they just stopped calling and they stopped coming around. I needed support, but I felt alone. My earthly support system was crumbling. It was just me and Jesus. I always had support from my husband and children, but they were scared too. I began talking with others in a support group online. I was one in the past to discourage talking to people on a computer, but yet talking to others going through a hard time on the computer was somehow comforting. I joined a group on daily strength. I began encouraging other people facing impossible circumstances. I even started telling others about Jesus. At first, some people wanted to kick me off the site for talking about God. Then, after sharing my story, more people started listening to what I had to say. I had been praying Jesus would send someone into my life to fill the void and isolation while my husband was at work. I prayed for a sister. I met Sandy. We met on daily strength. She had been a flight nurse before becoming ill. She had lupus and was suffering daily from pain. She had a laugh that was infectious and always encouraged and uplifted me. I was undergoing lots of tests and procedures here in Georgia to try and understand why I was declining, and I was discouraged because the answers were not obvious. Some doctors were telling me I had Lou Gehrig's, and other doctors I used to work with began telling me some of my symptoms must be in my head or I needed to see a psychiatrist. The funny thing was, when I did go for an evaluation, the psychiatrist told me, "Honey, you don't have a mental illness. You need a good medical doc. Something's wrong medically, and they're missing it." I cried a lot and became very angry. I vented a lot of my frustration on the website. Sandy and I began talking on the phone. Some days we spoke up to 5 hours a day and quickly exchanged pictures of our families. We grew close. Through her illness, she had become angry at God. I began to share what was happening to me, and she softened. She started going back to church and renewed her faith. I shared the song Natalie Grant, Your Great Name, with her, and it quickly became her favorite. We listened to it together more than once and let the tears flow. I told her it was okay to be angry. I had been angry too, but then I told her that God loved us, and somehow the two of us helped each other heal. Christmas 2012 to 2013, my husband and I had just gotten home from the hospital, discouraged because we had no money to provide a Christmas for our children or food on the table. We had no idea what we would do, and we just wanted to throw in the towel. I started praying that God would make a way because we could do nothing about our circumstances. I was so sick I could barely get to the bathroom, much less cook a meal. Christmas Eve, our doorbell rang. I had no idea, but our family had been nominated for Christmas at my daughter's school after Gianna, who was in kindergarten at the time, told her teacher I was ill. A family showed up at our door with over 50 Christmas presents for our family, given by the Falcons football team, ranging from knitted hats and socks for me to coats for our children. They also provided dinner and gift cards for gas and groceries. I sobbed, and I told them thank you. They replied, "God bless you and your family." He certainly did. He provided, and the funny part was I never had to ask. Only in prayer, and then strangers we didn't even know who loved Jesus just showed up at our door. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. In the meantime, and this is hard, in January 2013, my job of 15 years fired me without notice. I got a letter in the mail 2 weeks after it was too late to apply for COBRA. I lost my medical insurance too. They will not let me access my pension until I turn 65, even though I was vested. And after my hospitalization in the first weeks of January, the hospital has not stopped coming after me for the entire bill because my insurance dropped me in the middle of my medical stay, all because I wasn't given the opportunity to apply for COBRA. All of this from a place I worked for and dedicated hours, years, 15 years of service. My service years were exemplary. I never had one complaint against me. I could not understand how this could happen. Then my husband had to take out his retirement just to keep us afloat. He pays more than 75% of his paycheck just to keep me insured. I was able to apply and win SSI on the first application because of my diagnoses. That helped some, but when I had to apply and when I went to the DMV to get my handicap placard, I cried. I cried because I just wanted to get well. I didn't want any of this. I wanted to get better and go back to work. What happened to me was not fair, but instead of stirring up the hornet's nest and getting nowhere, I decided to take my bitter pill and keep going. After all, being fired and losing my benefits is nothing in the face of facing a terminal illness, is it? No. I had no choice but to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and I was going to do it. I wasn't going to let what happened to me make me bitter and angry. I can't, because that is not what God wants me to do. He needs me for something bigger. Sandy and I thought of each other as family. Sandy was a trauma nurse till she became ill, so she had lots of ideas in the face of the new problems I was facing. She never gave up on me. She always called daily to see if I was okay, and ran down a checklist of suggestions to keep my mind off my problems. She always made me smile. We listened to Chris Tomlin and Casting Crowns to encourage each other. Her favorite verse was Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. She would always remind me I wasn't alone. She had a son named, I'm going to name him RJ for privacy, who meant everything to her. She was my big sister from another mother. She understood the isolation that came with illness. She was 50 years old. Her husband worked full time, but we were all making plans to visit in the summer when her son went to space camp. Sandy taught her son about the Bible, Jesus' love, and helping others who were going through a hard time. Her son was carrying on her legacy, and she was so proud of him because he helped so many who were in need. She is very proud of you if you're watching this video, and I am too. And I miss your mom. Sandy also spoke to another girl named Jenna who suffers from lupus. She called both of us her little sisters. She always said we had a lot in common and should talk on the phone. We both spoke to Sandy daily. While talking to Sandy, she started a fundraiser for me called Give Forward after finding out about my job firing me in the midst of a devastating medical crisis. The fundraiser raised enough money to get me to the next stop, which ended up being Mayo Clinic. We decided after spending time in prayer it would be best if I went for another opinion at a research hospital out of state. I called my neurosurgeon at Hopkins and he agreed, so he called some physician friends he had at Mayo Clinic, and the doctors there offered to help since my case was unusual. Prior to going to Mayo Clinic, a women's Bible study group in my neighborhood, headed up by one of my next-door neighbors who is a devoted Christian, called and asked if they could begin bringing in meals to my family and helping around the house. Who knew? I accepted and began forming relationships with some of the most beautiful Christian women you'd ever want to know. They're a strong support system even on the worst of days. When I prayed and told God I was lonely, He opened the gates. And strong Christians literally showed up at our door out of nowhere. He's so good. Em had become one of my best friends, and she attends a Bible study every Wednesday night and started taking me with her. I've forged strong bonds with prayer warriors who have helped me through some really tough trials and they're from several different churches. What binds us all together is our faith in God. May 2013, Mayo Clinic. After praying about our circumstances and my health decline, my husband and I traveled to Mayo Clinic for another opinion. While on the way, I spoke with Sandy by phone. She told me she had pneumonia, but she assured me she was home on antibiotics, and her husband had traveled to a conference out of town. She sounded strong. Her son RJ was away at a friend's house for that weekend to visit. On the way to Mayo, we were on a desolate road in the middle of nowhere. I was lying down in the back seat of the truck on 3 or 4 liters of oxygen, just really sick. A red car drove up right next to our car, and a man with sharp blue eyes and blonde hair waved at my husband and pointed down at our back tire on my side. The tire had gone flat and we had not realized it. It started smoking. Had we not stopped, we might have had a bad accident and a fire with my oxygen concentrator pouring out pure oxygen would have been a disaster. He was on cruise control at 80 miles an hour. When we looked up, the car was gone in both directions. There hadn't been time for any car to disappear. I knew that the man in the car and the car was an answer to prayer. I'm confident an angel of mercy visited us that afternoon. While at Mayo, I was tested for rare things. Because my oxygen went low every time I got up to move around, I was put into the intensive care unit, and a balloon was placed inside my heart while I was at rest and when I was up on an exercise bike. I was diagnosed with heart failure and pulmonary hypertension while at Mayo Clinic. This was devastating for us because it was then that I realized how serious this illness was and that it's not curable. The day after I found this devastating news out, it was Mother's Day. My heart ached because I could not go home to be with my children. I was stuck at Mayo finishing my testing. Worse, I received a phone call early the morning of Mother's Day. I sobbed. Because my sister went home to be with Jesus. That day. The morning of Mother's Day 2013. I rejoiced because I knew Sandy was with Jesus after all the talks we had together when she renewed her faith. But I was sad. Back to isolation, I felt alone. My sister was gone. Sorry. She's in here, and I miss her every day. I think I sat in silence the entire way back home. I believe my husband was stunned at my new diagnosis, and I was stunned because my sister had unexpectedly passed away. I felt alone and scared. I didn't have time to properly mourn her death because Mayo Clinic recommended we go again to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore to troubleshoot my shunt. The doctors there suggested that it may be causing problems further irritating my heart. I was to be admitted into intensive care the following week in Baltimore. We returned home exhausted and drained, only to turn around and return to Johns Hopkins. My poor husband drove each and every time we went on the road. This was no different. His job was in jeopardy because he was taking so much time off. I had already lost mine. At this point we were just desperate for answers. I tried to go onto the support site, but it wasn't the same without Sandy. I began to pray fervently for direction. I felt lost, alone, scared, and sinking fast. My children and husband were scared too and afraid of what was happening. I had progressed from walking and being independent working to being oxygen dependent, barely able to walk to the bathroom, unable to cook for myself, wheelchair dependent, and unable to drive by this time. My health was declining rapidly and no one could do anything about it. Life was spiraling out of control fast. In the midst of it all, the hospital I'd once worked for was calling me 3 times a day to harass us for payment and sending people to my house to serve us with papers to show up for court. It was a circus. I could not go to the media with my story because the people who ran the local TV channels and newspaper sat on the board of the hospital I used to work for, so it was useless to fight. I gave up for a while and sank into a deep hole of despair and self-pity. My parents withdrew from daily life with me not because they didn't love me, but because they worked full time, and my father stated through a tearful voice that he could fix a boo-boo, dry my tears, but he simply cannot fix this, meaning my illness, and he couldn't bear to watch it happen. My mom agreed, so they took some time. They just had a tough time watching their daughter decline. I wasn't angry, simply sad. I had hit rock bottom, or so I thought. I rode with a neighbor to the Bible bookstore one sunny day and I read something that reminded me of Jesus' love. It was the story of the footprints. I was reminded of how he knows our pain, our burdens. When I can walk no further, he carries me. I realized he's carried me this far. He's not forgotten. Sandy needed to remember Jesus' love. This is why we met. Then he took her home to heal her body. He didn't do this to me. I live in a fallen world. I was trying to tell others about God's love, so Satan must hate me. I grinned because if I was being attacked, it must mean I'm doing something right. I have to put boots on ground again and go to battle. I must be under attack because I'm praying for others, my husband's salvation, and talking on the internet about Jesus. Well, Satan will be at war from now on. Bring it on. I began to pray for direction on what to do next. I prayed for another mother who was unafraid of illness, who could step in my mother's absence to be there for me during this illness. I prayed for another sister to help me through. I also prayed for a place for my family to have to escape the stress of this illness, somewhere to gain peace and meet others who love Jesus that can witness to my husband. I prayed for a new church home to welcome us with open arms. I prayed for answers to why I'd become ill so fast. This is going to sound crazy, but I even prayed for a loving dog. I even asked for a golden retriever because my boxer we had during the first part of my illness had started growling at me when I got on oxygen. He tried to attack me each time I walked by him so I could no longer have him in my home. He became vicious when I got sick because I guess he saw me as weak. New family to love. Shortly after Sandy passed, I reached out to Jenna, the little sis Sandy often lovingly referred to as my sister. We both loved Sandy, so we had that in common. From the moment she picked up the phone, I knew it was meant to be. She had such a sweet spirit, and even though she told me she wasn't religious, she listened to me talk about Jesus. She said she didn't mind if I talked about Jesus because I was going through so much. She felt it was genuine coming from me. She's also 36 years old and has a terminal illness. She's been battling now for several years. She's never been able to have children of her own, but now she knows my two children, and they call her Aunt. She loves she loves them, and it fills the hole that was in her heart. We helped each other heal from losing Sandy, and I love her. I also found my adopted mom. Her name is JB, to protect her privacy. From the first time she picked up the phone, she understood what I needed in my life. She filled the void, and she loves Jesus. She loved and lost many children who suffered from traumatic or terminal illness. She understood the ups and downs of numerous doctor's appointments and the frustration of symptoms that are scary, that no one understands due to its rarity. She suffers from a rare list of rare illnesses as well as a rare brain tumor. She's a survivor of a traumatic brain injury from a hit-and-run accident. She welcomed me with open arms and calls me daily. Many would scoff at the way we met, but I cried on my birthday last year after learning my disease was incurable and said, God, I need my mom. JB called and simply stated, Happy birthday, daughter of my heart. I love you, and I am celebrating the day of your birth with this cake I made. Talk about warming my heart, just what the great physician ordered. Also helped to fill the void in her life too. She has also suffered immense loss and tragedy. God knew we needed each other, and He provided. God knew I needed a sister, and He provided. Unfortunately, my adoptive mom and sister live in other states, so I've never been able to hug them in real time. However, I am sure we will eventually. In any case, we'll be together in heaven. My adopted mom, JB, has many children that inspire me because of all the adversity they've faced. Her youngest baby girl passed away of a rare heart condition. From her passing, other children have been saved because they identified what caused her death in order to help others. When JB learned of my heart condition, this only fueled her forward to advocate for me because of the loss of her own daughter. She inspires me as well because she has a strength I admire in the face of all the adversity she goes through. This helps keep me going. May 2013. It's important for those of you that struggle with illness and doctors that turn you away or do not take you seriously. Keep trying. Don't give up. I went through 15 doctors before I found 3 that listened. When I went to Emory, the doctor for their heart transplant program told me to go home and write my will because I had reached the end of my rope. I refused to accept that, and when I told him about my children needing their mother, through tears, he didn't even blink an eye. Compassion's what's missing, and when I took care of people, I showed compassion and love. Hold a hand, sit down, make eye contact. One day it'll be you staring up helplessly from a stretcher while someone pokes you with a needle. Don't forget to be human. People are not a diagnosis. I prefer to be called by my first name, and we'll go from there. June 2013. It's important for you to understand something. And it's that to be absent from the body is to be present with Jesus immediately. Not tomorrow or years from now, but immediately. One afternoon I started typing responses in a terminally ill support group online that I founded on Daily Strength. I still share most every day on the support site and tell others about Jesus. Post verses or music in order to help others understand God's love. I also get support from other members there who are battling terminal illness like me. I began feeling bad on this one day, and I was home alone. I remember getting up to go to the bathroom, and I was really dizzy. My heart was pounding so hard I could not feel it beating, and it was not regular. I was struggling to breathe, and I picked up my cell phone to call 911. I'd just come upstairs and thought to leave the garage door unlocked because I had an uneasy feeling something bad was about to happen. I dialed 911 and told the person that I was struggling to breathe, and the room went black. I immediately felt light. I knew who I was, yet I didn't have any pain and I wasn't struggling anymore. I felt immediate love and peace. My grandfather, who had passed years before, told me it wasn't my time yet, and I remember not wanting to leave. I woke up in a cold room with a crash cart by me and people yelling my name. The pain of my body immediately surrounded me, and I would have rather stayed where I was at that time. I could tell you it was peaceful, and for the first time in years I had no pain at all. This is my one and only experience with near death, and I can tell you the first thought I had is that all? It's no big deal. What's all the fuss about? That was not hard at all. What is hard, is who we leave behind, who grieve and miss us for a time, and living with chronic illness. Dying is easy. You are released from the confines of the physical body, and yet you still know who you are when you leave. To be absent from the physical body is to be present with Jesus. Sometimes He heals us by taking us home, and it's as simple as that. We are never quite content to stay here on earth because we are homesick. We long for heaven and for Jesus. July 2013, after I prayed for God to provide a reprieve for our family, my husband and I were randomly out driving one day to get away from the stress of our lives. We happened to take exit 173 because it looked nice, and I'd commented, "I wonder what's over here." I just felt good about it. We kept driving and drove past a beautiful white church on the left called Poplar Springs. And I remember thinking, what a beautiful little church that is. I would love to go there one Sunday and check it out. In addition, I remember feeling warm and fuzzy inside. We drove a little ways past the church, and my husband didn't want to turn down Lakeshore Drive 'cause he said there would be nothing there, but I told him to anyway. Well, we kept driving down the road, and there was a horse pasture on the right-hand side and beautiful little houses scattered down the road, scattered all along the way, some of them lakefront. My husband said we'd never be able to afford that, so we might as well not even stop. It so happened there was a for sale sign by a cute little green cabin. We almost missed it, so we stopped because the owners were out cleaning their front yard. They'd been using the cabin for a storage shed, but we didn't care 'cause it had the most beautiful relaxing view of the water. We felt drawn there. We talked to them a bit, took down the number. Both my husband and I were downhearted, thinking we couldn't afford the place. Well, I prayed about it. We counteroffered something we thought he would turn down. It just so happened that his wife facilitated help for families of terminally ill mothers. I wrote a letter to them, and we were closing on the property a month later. One neighbor at the lake just lost her husband to heart failure. Another neighbor was my Sunday school teacher at Poplar Springs and a close friend. Another neighbor was a hospice nurse. Another two neighbors became close friends and members of Poplar Springs. I've met more loving neighbors and had a fish fry with some since then, and ended up making my church home Poplar Springs. You see, the church that we joined is full of beautiful people who love Jesus. Our neighborhood is full of beautiful people who just make us feel right at home. One elderly lady in the neighborhood lost her home in a fire and had nothing to her name, not even a pair of socks. Her home was rebuilt in just a few months. She's moving back in, and we're there to welcome her back home with open arms. Like I said, everybody takes care of each other. We even found a golden retriever after church one day. In Sunday school, Miss Brenda told me she wished someone would take home this dog that had been lying outside by the church for a week. When I went outside and looked, it was a golden retriever, who we named Bella. She has loved on me from day one. When I prayed for a golden retriever, I had no idea I'd get one. This church, our church family, our lake home surrounded by loving people, is just part of the blessing God gave me in my life, even down to the dog. I joined Brenda's Sunday school class, my Sunday school teacher, who's become my close friend, because one of my other close friends brought me, whose husband knows Jesus and fishes with mine every week. He's sharing Jesus' love with my husband even while fishing. A few weeks later, after I joined Brenda's class, they prayed over me and shared God's love with my family by taking up a love offering which helped us get to Duke. I didn't ask them to do it. They just wanted to. I prayed God would make a way for us to pay the gas to get there. We traveled to Duke and I was again admitted into intensive care. It was there that we learned that everything that happened stemmed from the Syringomyelia and Syringomyelia. And now that the damage has been done, there's no cure and no effective treatment. I went to Duke to be evaluated for a heart transplant. Because of my disease, I don't qualify because the disease would affect the new heart. In my case, it was identified too late because I was dismissed so many times by my doctors here in Georgia. I have one doctor here in Georgia who takes me seriously. It's my primary care physician, and he works with all my out-of-state doctors. The problem with my laundry list of illnesses is that treatment for one is contraindicated for another. For example, the treatment for POTS is 3 grams of salt daily to maintain blood pressure. The salt's not recommended for the heart failure. I'm on the rare disease list because there's only one physician in the state of Georgia that treats Syringomyelia. There's one problem. His office refused to see me until I pay my hospital bill in full, and he's from my old hospital downtown Atlanta, so I have to go out of state for care. On my latest trip to Duke, I went there prepared for treatment, but the doctors there told me comfort measures and medications. I was admittedly upset, but I've accepted it. I'm here to say that I will fight every day for one more day because I have my family and my children. Jesus is using me in a big way. I'm not going to give up, and I'm going to share my testimony as long as I have a voice. And when I do not have a voice, someone can read it on my behalf. I've also decided to be a spokesperson for Syringomyelia and Syringomyelia here in Georgia because there is one other person, there's a couple other people that have Syringomyelia like me, and like me, they have trouble finding medical care as well. We need a voice, and that is why I have decided to start a foundation to research for a cure and to provide resources for those of us that have this disease, to change the medical community and change the face of Social Security. Um, I was told by a prominent medical person at Duke that the doctor who headed up their genetics research program for my disease to discover effective treatments passed away. That was another disappointment. The truth is, my condition is rare, and there simply are not enough patients with my disease to warrant spending lots of time or money to research for a cure. At this time, there is no cure, and right now, that is the biggest obstacle is finding someone to take the time to do the research. There are people right now doing research in King Charles Cavalier Spaniels who have this disease. We need someone to take up the cross and do the research for human beings that have this disease as well. I love dogs and animals as much as the next person, but we also need research for us. Sharing my testimony is a way for me to share God's love and tell you He's real, doing things in my life even to this day. I've told you of so many blessings, and there have been many more that have occurred. It's because God is real and He is working in my life now. We have a burden to share His love with everyone. Don't be blindsided by prejudice or someone's lack of faith. Many times when I'm sitting in the waiting room at a doctor's office, I will share a part of my testimony right then, with someone or the whole waiting room. I will ask them, what will you do before you get called back? God uses believers by showing non-believers how we face adversity through what we go through. It's how we respond to that adversity that becomes our greatest testimony. Use examples from what's happening in your life right now as a testimony when you know it's an answer to prayer. We can face adversity with strength and no fear because we have Jesus. I know that He's in control of my life, not me. I know He loves me, and because Jesus died on the cross, I have eternal life. My future is secure. I want nothing more than to see everyone I love go to heaven. Jesus went to everyone. It didn't matter what they had done. He was unafraid to go to the rough places. He went to where they were. Even when He was dying on the cross, He shared salvation with the two criminals who deserved to die for what they'd done. One accepted Him and one rejected Him. Jesus didn't want perfect people. He didn't have perfect disciples. He chose people who were flawed, and He loved them anyway. There's nothing anybody can do that's so bad that Jesus won't love you. What matters is your relationship with Jesus Christ when everything's said and done. He gave us free will so we can make choices. When you know Him, to die is gain. I love my church family as well as all the beautiful people I've met along the way. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me share. I will leave you with my two favorite verses. Isaiah 41:10, do not fear, I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And Psalm 73:25-26, I have no one in heaven but you. I want nothing on earth besides you. My body and my mind may become weak, but God is my strength. He is mine forever. This testimony is to be continued. God is not finished with me yet. Thank you. God bless you.